We are people of the ocean, and we're surrounded by the ocean. And if we're not on the ocean doing ocean things, then who really are we? It's also a karakia in a sense, that when you're actually chanting, you're chanting to the Waka. You're chanting to be one with the Waka. And when you're only one with the Waka, can you glide united through the water. When you find an island, it pretty much is like a small pebble coming off the horizon, and then it starts growing. So it's not like you're going towards the island, but you're actually putting the island towards you. Navigation isn't just about knowing the stars and the moon and the sun, swells and winds and stuff like that. Navigation's also to do with understanding your canoe, understanding people, and understanding yourself. The mother is your canoe, and the ocean is your father. So you look after your mother will look after you. And we're only this little speck of nothing in this big blue ocean. And who am I to try and make myself bigger than this big blue ocean? Quite fortunate that I was able to navigate through stars to find my island. But navigating my own emotions was probably the biggest challenge for me in order to find my island.
Tēnā tātou, planting seeds no mai hoki mai, a ki tēnei kaupapa. Miha ke kia koe anō hoki Tamahau, nau nei whai wā, a ki te noho tai ki te wānanga tai raro i te kaupapa nei of planting seeds. Thank you so much for being here, bro. I've just hooked up the trailer i te whānau, and I've driven over to Tauranga, and I'm here at the Tauranga Tourist Park, and just recently connected with Tamahau through a mutual friend, Te Urirangi. And it's just a real awesome privilege, I suppose, bro, for you to answer the message, for us to have that connection, and for that to be shared here for everyone. So i ringa i tērā, bro, nau mai ki tēnei kaupapa, and how are things, bro, pehe ana?
Nā, kei te ora, kore te mea nui, mihi ana koe, kia koe e hoa, me hoki kia turus, for tagging me in the post. Tēnā tātou katoa, mihi ana.
True, and so for someone who is, perhaps got a lot of things that you do, how can you explain to someone who might not know who you are and what you do? Like, what are some of those things, bro?
Well, some of the things I do. First of all, interested in Waka, kaupapa Waka. First and foremost, brought up around Tākitimu Moana, born and bred here. Was brought up by my dad and his brother, Tākitimu Tangitu, Tangitu, my father, and learnt a connection with the ocean. When I was younger, my dad would take us out on the Moana, teach us how to drive outboard motors, and learn how to gather pipi and stuff like that. So that was me and my older brother. Would usually do that for tangihanga for our marae, and do it for our dad and all of our kaumatas around home. And then it was my dad's older brother, Kiritoha, that got me into wakataua at a young age. At first, it was a bit of a thrown in the deep end moment. I wouldn't call it forced. I would call it loved.
Nice.
He loved me into that kaupapa, and that's pretty much how I started in kaupapa Waka.
So being here from Tauranga Moana, being surrounded by the Moana, and then just having that kind of upbringing with pāpā from a young age, and it's just naturally progressed into all of these other things. And what have you learned mostly about being, someone from the Moana, bro? Like we had a kōrero, and you were saying, man, we aren't just tangata whenua, we're tangata moana as well. So can you speak a little bit more into that, brother?
So I was brought up on a saying of, we are people of the ocean, and we're surrounded by the ocean. And if we're not on the ocean doing ocean things, then who really are we? It just makes me look at myself and look at our Moana and look at our surroundings. It makes me wonder, why don't we have a strong connection with the Moana? I mean, our tupuna travelled here from over the Moana, and yet I find a lot of my the next generation and my youngers are not really connecting back into the ocean. So that was something I was brought up with, just getting into the ocean and doing ocean activities, obviously gathering kai moana and that sort of stuff with pāpā, and then eventually going on to wakataua, eventuating into wakama as well, so the competitive space of Waka. But through wakataua, you learn about teamwork, because our Waka is 26 meters long, named Tākitimu, carries about 44 kaihoe. The most we've carried on there is 80 kaihoes, and it's about working together and learning how to work together on the ocean to be able to get from one position to another position, with that team building.
And is that, because I've seen, a few waka taua, but there's always a lot of the chanting, the hoi,
Mm.
hoi, and there's that just to create that sense of connection and synergy and also just being in rhythm, because like all of those things have a bit of rhythm to it, and it just gets everyone connected for the cause, I suppose. And so are those some of the things that you guys are learning, to be in sync? And is that the thing that you're learning in that space, is like we have to work together?
There is a sense of that, of the unity and the unison of everything, but it's also a karakia in a sense that when you're actually chanting, you're chanting to the waka. You're chanting to be one with the waka. And when you're only one with the waka, can you glide together, united through the water. Many other people don't realise that when you're actually chanting, you're actually doing a karakia, and you're laying down the foundations of your journey as you're moving along.
That's cool. That, and very interesting, I guess, to hear that as well, bro. And I'm reminded of a kōrero that I heard in a wānanga setting. And one of the kōrero was just around how when our tipuna were on the moana, it was as if they've been guided by the moana because the earth is moving, and so they just like moving on the moana in that way. Has that been any kind of kōrero around that, bro? Like in terms of how waka moving and the navigation and some of the Mātauranga that comes with it?
So I'll fast forward a bit to from Waka Taua to Waka Hourua, and when we're what we call fishing up islands. When you find an island, it pretty much is like a small pebble in the coming off the horizon, and then it starts growing. So it's not like you're going towards the island, but you're actually pulling the island towards you. As well as you're not really going over the ocean, but the ocean is going below you, and you're in this area that everything's just moving towards you. And that's more, going into the navigation side of things and the voyaging.
And so what's the difference, bro? So there is, waka taua, and then the navigation and voyaging. Can you, talk about, those two spaces and then how you moved from waka taua and then moved more into navigation?
In 2011, I was asked to be one of the captains on our Waka Taua Tākitimu at the opening of the Rugby World Cup. We're part of the Ocean on the Water team. There was about 26 waka. They were part of the opening of that ceremony. I came home 2 weeks later. A man named Jack Thatcher, he asked me if I would like to learn how to sail. And all my understanding of sailing, Kaupa Māori sailing, was Te Aurere. A waka named Te Aurere, built by Hector Busby, sailed to Rarotonga in 1992. So I was pretty excited to finally get to learn how to sail. My whole build-up towards it was, yes, I'm going to finally get to sail on Te Aurere. Got picked up by a man named Kiharoa Nuku, and we took us 6 hours to get up to the far north to Hector's house. And then we went to go and introduce ourselves to the waka. Little did I know it wasn't Te Aurere. It was actually Ngāhirakamaitawhiti, Hector's second waka. So at first I was a bit bummed out, but then at second I realised, this is the opportunity presented to myself, and instantly just fell in love with this waka. So the transition for myself was this commitment of how many years on our waka taua, becoming a captain on the waka. Started as a bailer boy, worked myself up as a paddler, got pushed into the ihu section, became one of the captains, and then finally was asked to learn how to sail. This was back in 2011, and it was Ngāhiraka's first ever time leaving the far north. Was led by a man named Stan Conrad, who was the original captain of Te Aurere. And we were able to sail her down to Auckland during the Rugby World Cup, and this was pretty much her maiden voyage. And little did I know as well that the reason why she was coming down to Tauranga, and the reason why she was coming down to Tauranga, was to start training new voyagers for an up-and-coming voyage to Rapa Nui, Easter Island. And at that time when I found out, I knew straight away, if I wanted to be on that trip, I had to dedicate myself.
You have to commit.
Yeah, commit. So that was part of it as well, was the commitment side. I learned all the commitment through Waka Taua, all those many years on Waka Taua. So I just naturally just gravitated towards Waka Hourua. At that time, I didn't know much about navigation. I was just interested in sailing.
Mm.
I was interested in waka because growing up around the water, you see our waka on the water and you see the beauty of it. When I see waka Hourua on the water doing their thing, I see the beauty in it. And that's probably what the main thing that drew me to waka Hourua was the beauty of sailing, was the beauty of waka just gliding through the water, the sails harnessing the wind and able to give momentum to our two Cody logs moving through the water. So that whole world just blew my mind. I don't know what you call it, but there's just this love that I had there that I could see everything, and it was like walking with the atua. Just sitting there on the deck of our waka, you know, you had tāne, everything's lashed together, so there's papa tuanuku, you had tangaroa around you, harnessing tāwhiri mātia, you had ngā hihi o tamanu te rā there, and at night time you had hina mārama, you had all the whetū, so it was like you're in this world of your tupuna, just sitting there on the deck of the waka, just, you know. I don't know how to explain that.
Bro, took me there, bro. Holy. Because that's a whole world view, eh? You know, that's a whole paradigm. But you being able to, I guess, see that at that sort of stage and what you're nurturing was probably like just a love, you know, that was brewing. And, you know, wasn't an easy sense of, okay, you know, because we're just talking off camera, and sometimes the biggest barriers are those barriers to even commit to something. And so for you, can you talk about that, bro, around, you know, you had this natural inclination to go into that, you saw the love, but then you decided, I'm going to commit to this. And what were some of the barriers that came up, if there were any?
Biggest barriers for me was probably time, really. I'm a hard kaupapa kid. Every kaupapa that I involve myself in, I'll give it 100% all the time. I don't know why I do it, I just do it.
Yeah.
I was also brought up in Mauraka and Tākitimu Moana, taught by a number of mentors over the years, Awanui Black, Maya Wharekura, Koro Nicholas, Jack Thatcher, and through that I was able to get into kaupapa, and some of them were like the battle commemorations going on, hina rangiriri, and all that sort of stuff. So I was really a kaupapa kid. Whenever there was a kaupapa on, I'd be there.
You'll be there.
So that was probably my issue with my commitment, was if the waka was there, but so if Ngāhiraka was calling, but Tākitimu called, I'd probably gravitate more to Tākitimu because that's where all my foundations were. But if there were kaupapa Mauraka going on, I'd probably gravitate towards the Mauraka. So it was that.
Just being pulled, of different commitments, and different interests,
and sometimes you have to decide and put your foot down. Okay, I can't do all of it, but I'm going to do this. And when I do commit, I commit 100%.
Yeah, I reckon that's probably a big thing for a lot of people, is there are so many interests, and, you know, sometimes you give to certain kaupapa, but for it to go to that next level, there has to be some level of full dedication, you know, and then once you actually commit to it, and it's not to say that, you know, the other things aren't as relevant or as significant, but it's just for this season and for this time. This is where all of your energy is going. And, you know, what were some of the other things, bro, you know, because you're learning about not just navigating, you're learning about the connection to the atua. And, you know, like you shared, you've got tāne there, you've got tāwhiri mātia, you've got tangaroa, you know, you're right there in the elements, bro. And is that part of the Mātauranga that you're receiving when you're learning waka Hourua, bro?
I guess that's for me personally, the Mātauranga in terms of atua, that was like a natural thing. I don't know how to explain that. So when I started getting into waka Hourua and navigation, I wanted to learn kōrero tuku iho. I wanted to learn about Waka and their journey down to Aotearoa, as well as the stars, their star names and stuff like that, the whakapapa that connects every single star to itself. I wanted to learn that, but then realised, you know, like commitment, you can't have it all. You can't have it all. So it's little bites. Yeah. Little bites. And committing to that little bites, because if I started taking big chunks, I realised I would probably put myself back a few steps more if I try to chunk more on one thing.
Nice.
Hope that answers your question.
Nah, that does, bro. It does. Because, when you get a bit of taste of new Mātauranga, there's a thirst that comes from it, and you just you tend to over-consume. and then you're not really grasping the understanding of what's really needed, eh? And so I see it not just like within your space, but, I can resonate with that in just learning in general, because there's so much knowledge, there's so much Mātauranga, but what's relevant for you at that time, and can you nurture whatever is resonating for you and lay that down, and then once you do that one, then you open up for a bit more and a bit more, eh? And so let's talk about your fella's recent haerenga, bro. That was cool to see it, I guess, be shared in that way, but also for the tautoko that was surrounding it, like Te Ao Māori was like fully invested, but not even just Te Ao Māori here, but even over in Samoa, and just the way that you guys were received and pōhiri over there. So can you talk about what that haerenga was, and just some of the things that come out of it, bro?
So Te Hekinga ki tua, ki Samoa was graduation sale. So there's been a number of us that's been studying traditional celestial navigation, non-instrumental, under our master Jack Thatcher, for the past 9 to 10 years. His kura's called Te Kura Waka, or otherwise known as Te Kura o Ngā Kuri a Tarawhata. And he started this back in 2015, at the end of 2015, that summer, where a group of us, I think there was about 30 of us that first came together for that first wānanga. And over the years, we just dropped down to, there's about 10, maybe 7 of us. And this was our final graduation sale, to find Samoa. So in order to find Samoa, he split the pathway up between Aotearoa to Rangitahua, or the Kermadec Islands, Kermadec Islands to Niue, Niue to Samoa, Samoa to Tonga, Tonga to Kermadec, and Kermadec's home. And the reason why I split it up like that was to give us all an opportunity to navigate on our own.
Wow.
And navigation isn't just about knowing the stars and the moon and the sun, swells and winds and stuff like that. Navigation's also to do with understanding your canoe, understanding people, and understanding yourself. On this recent voyage, there were 7 of us tasked with navigating our Waka. Toiora Hawira, who'd done the first leg from Aotearoa to Kermadec, and then we had a tag team, 2 of them, a Pākehā, James Tremlett, and Kāwai Joe from Gisborne. They were able to navigate from Kermadec to Niue, and then our first female, our first wahine, Te Ira Tohu, she navigated from Niue up to Samoa, and then Hinerapa Rupuha, another one of our tuahine, she navigated from Samoa to Tonga. And then our Japanese crew member, Saki Uchida, she navigated from Tonga or Eua down to Kermadec, and the last part was given to myself to navigate home. But yeah, it's just our graduation sale for the last over the last 10 years of learning.
No electronics, no GPS, none of that. It was
we had to carry all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
so we had to carry the GPS AOS, but that's all locked in one room.
Yeah.
And only the captain could see that sort of stuff, but we were not allowed to see any of that. When we go, like I say, non-instrumental, the Europeans had a thing called a sextant, which is like a glass thing, and you could read the sun's latitude to know exactly where you are on the earth.
Yeah.
So we weren't allowed to use any instruments like that. Any hand instruments. Obviously not allowed to look at the technology. So all the time and that sort of stuff was up to us. We had to know exactly when the time was. What I mean by that is we run 4 hours shifts. So there's a team of 10 of us. 8 of us are crew, one's a cook, one's a captain, and that's their sole jobs. And the 4 and 4 watches, you're awake for 4 hours and you're asleep for 4 hours, because we're only limited in our sleeping quarters at our bunks. You're sharing a bunk with somebody else,
right?
So you got to be able to swap in and out.
So not everyone can sleep at the same time, because there's just not enough room in the bunkers. Yeah, true.
Space. So we've got to think about that, and to enable us to switch over the shifts, you need to know what time it is. So you need to know how long 4 hours is.
Yeah.
And even understanding where the sun's position is at that time of the year. As we're getting closer to summer, we've realised the days were getting longer and the nights were getting shorter.
Yeah.
I think it's when we got closer to Aotearoa, I was up with they were meant to be the 10 p.m. to the 2 a.m. shift, and I was up with them and I realized the sun was coming up. That's when I realized, oh, damn, the sun's coming up way earlier than we think.
Yeah.
And it's actually setting way later than we think.
Yeah.
Which means our days are getting longer.
Getting
and
longer.
And stuff like that. You got to be able to sink into the environment and understand that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Man, bro, that sounds like so next level, because when I'm thinking about it, and we're talking about even just at the start, just how we're meant to be people of the sea, but what I get from it is like, man, it's a very scary place as well. Like for a lot of us, I suppose, who haven't really had that kind of upbringing around it. And the reason why I say that is because, man, just being bang smack in the middle of the ocean and only seeing ocean around you, like that creates like a lot of fear, just in the thought of it. But hearing how you talk about it and being connection to the taiao and all of your fellas' experience over the years, like what does that feel like to you? Just being out and only seeing ocean in every single direction. Like, what's the feeling? Is it calm? Is it like, oh yeah, there's confidence in where we're going and each other? Like, what are some of the kōrero in regards to that?
Oh, it's well, my very first ever time I seen that was when we left Easter Island. Freaked me out, Freaked me out for a little bit there, because I'd look back and you could see the island, and within 2 hours the island was gone.
Yeah,
and you keep looking around and looking around. And there's nothing but just ocean. There's the horizon in the ocean. But the more and more you do it, the more comfortable you get on the canoe. And like I was saying, if you have a strong connection with the ocean and the canoe, everything is just easy.
Yeah.
Jack talks about the mother is your canoe and the ocean is your father. You look after your mother will look after you.
Yeah.
So our dedication to maintenance and fixing our canoe as well is important when you're going voyaging, and that can create your connection with the canoe. The more and more you repair her or look after her, she will look after you on the water. So just starting back at ground roots level, starting with your connection with the canoe at maintenance level is a good start, and understanding that and knowing that when you're out there, she's actually there to look after you as well. And having that trust in all your other crew as well.
Yeah.
To do their job. So when they're navigating, they trust you to do your job, because your sole job on there is to steer, trim the sails. So then we're using the canoe to its best performance, and making sure that we're steering in the right direction for that navigator.
Man.
But yeah.
Seems like connection is a big one, across the board, like, and I think that's just not even, that's a Māori thing their way, hononga ki ngā mea katoa, and I guess being more in sync with that just probably instills more of their confidence and allows you to have trust in the things that you're doing and things that you've been taught. And what was the feeling like being received by Samoa, bro? Like, what was that? Because that was like the first half of the leg, the journey, and it was like, man, you fellas arrived safely.
Yep.
Like what was being you celebrated, once you got there. So, talk a little bit about that too, bro.
That was. I've been a part of a lot of ceremonies, but that one was different. It wasn't just a welcome to our island thing. It was more like a welcome home.
Yeah.
Thank yous sort of thing. Thank yous for coming, for bringing your fellas canoe here. Because in a lot of the history, I've found out that Tākitimu originated from Samoa as the Waka named Tāraipo. And so it felt like that too. Like it was more like a going home rather than going to a distant island over the ocean, over the far horizon. It was more like a going home. And even all the different signs that we've seen, like we were invited to a school named Savovo, and when we were naming our trip, some of the names dropped out was Te Hekingaki to o Tāwowo. And it just so happened that kura was named Savovo. So I was like, oh, we were meant to come here. It was all meant to happen.
Yeah.
Even the kōrero around one of the islands in a Tongan group called Vavau is also related to that Tāwowo kōrero, and beyond Tāwowo is Samoa. So, all these little things were just dropping for us. Even though we just titled it Te Hekingaki Tua, another person said to us, a saying is, Ki tua o Tāwowo means you're a little bit different. And Jack always said to us, well, you have to be a little bit different to do this sort of stuff. It's not for everybody.
Yeah.
So, going back to Samoa, going back beyond Tāwowo was just like, we were going back
Going home.
pretty much, yeah.
It's such a cool thing when you have those little tohu just popping up, and it's more of like a reassurance or confirmation, that, man, we're meant to be exactly where we are, and we're meant to be doing exactly what we're meant to be doing, because, you could think about it on your scale, bro, but if you think about things that you've had to go through in order for that to happen, it sort of makes all of that stuff worth it in a sense, and probably the same for all of you guys as a team, and you fellas have probably built like lifelong memories and connections because of journeys such as that. And so, were there some cool wānanga that you were having with the crew, bro, on the Waka, or what were some like unique experiences that happened?
Yeah, so on the first leg, it was on Toyora's leg, going up to Kermadec. We see it in a lot of whales. Even when we left Aotearoa, there was a big humpback jumping in front of us. It was pretty much a tohu for us to start. And then we got closer and closer to Kermadec. You could see all these different whales heading in the same direction. So that was pretty cool. And then we seen Manuoku, which is like this. It's a manu for us, that tohu's land. And usually in the morning they'll fly away from land and go fishing, and in the afternoon they'll fly home to the island. We remember seeing, I think we're 2 days out from Kermadec. We seen some manuoku flying in one direction in the afternoon, and we were thinking, oh, yep, there's an island over there. Not too sure if it's our island, but our navigator confirmed it's not our island, said it was Curtis or Macaulay, and we were getting to Rao Island, which is the northern Kermadec Island. We got closer and closer, and I remember the night, I was on my midnight watch. I woke up a bit grumpy. Can't explain why. Well, I woke up a bit grumpy, and I stood there on the hoi, and I was staring the hoi, and I could hear this whale just blowing its blowhole, not so far from the canoe too, and then it got louder and louder, which made me realise it was getting closer and closer. Woke up Toyota, I was like, bro, can you hear that? Can you see that? And it went again, and then within minutes, you just see this big blue luminescent, like, it looked like something huge anyway. It was bigger than the canoe. Our canoe is 17.5 meters long. It was longer than the canoe. And it was just like this big blue, it was a whale, but it looked like a big blue submarine floating past us, and it just blew my mind. Like, bro, look at that. And a few others, they ran up to the front. It came next to our canoe, went in front of the canoe, and then gradually took off. But it was probably about maybe 10, 15 minutes, but felt like 2 hours.
And was it glowing?
It was glowing because of the luminescence, the luminescence in the water. If you've ever seen the movie Moana and the manta ray, the manta ray goes, well, exactly like that, but a whale. It was just like something I've never ever seen before. And in all my different journeys and all my different voyages, I've never ever seen anything like that. So it was like it was a big moment for me. And I remember the bro Kawa, he looked up in the sky and the Milky Way was up there. And he said straight away, I look like that, the Milky Way, the Ikaroa.
Oh.
And when he said the word, the Ikaroa, I was like, holy shit, the Ikaroa. We were in that moment right there. And then it made me realize, I was grumpy at the start, but then I wasn't. And it made me realize, we're only this little speck of nothing in this big blue ocean. And who am I to try and make myself bigger than this big blue ocean? Stuff like that, big realizations. And it brought me back down to earth. Apologized to my bro that I was grumpy. And then we sung the song Ka Poi Poia because it just resonated with that sort of moment. The Milky Way, te Ikaroa, te Mangoroa, i te rangi, the Ikaroa floating in the Moana, just that whole wānanga. And what was the drop for me was, Tamahau, just remember, you're just this little speck in the big blue ocean. Those sort of moments. That just,
bro, goosebumps, bro. Man, like, I've got a cool image in my mind, and I'm sure the people listening can somehow imagine that whole scene, but it won't be anywhere near what it actually was, and I feel good about what I'm imagining, but to be in it, in the experience, for to have that kind of, just to even witness that, just to be the ones on the Waka who are able to be a part of that real experience, but then the reflections around, hey, I'm not bigger than the ocean out here, like me whakaiti, just sort of like bring it back in. And what a cool moment for that to happen, but then the internal reflection, and probably that'll stay with you for a very, very long time, bro. And, we're talking about, the tohu that you guys have seen, whether it was the whales or even the manu that are coming out. Like, what are some other tohu that a signal that you're getting close to land, or that show you that, we're actually en route? Like, what are some other tohu, like as a navigator that you're looking for?
I'll only talk particularly to my league on our way home. My league from Kermadec's home was pretty special to myself because it was like the hikinga nui o ngā waka. They all came through Kermadec Island. They all came through there and eventually come down to Aotearoa. When we left Aotearoa, I seen a lineup of stars called Te Waka Maui, and I told Toiora, bro, that's my lineup right there. So when we come home, I need to find this exact lineup of stars. And what we'll do is we'll put Te Matua Maui on the right side of our waka, and we'll leave Mahutonga on the left side, and we'll just punch straight
through
in the middle, and that will get us home. On my leg home, it was pretty cloudy, low visibility. I had bugger all stars, but I was confident in the direction I was going in. And then I made a turn to head towards west, and then I started seeing, the boys pulled up some seaweed. They pulled up some seaweed. I personally wanted to see kelp, bull kelp, which is what we call rimurapa here in Tauranga. Another one was rubbish, just rubbish, garbage, anything. Driftwood is one of the tohus I wanted to see. The glowing lights of Auckland, as we got closer to Auckland. Tūkapua, who's the atu of all the clouds, the stagnant cloud, or Aotearoa, Tūkapua. And the other tohu I really wanted to see was that lineup of stars, Te Waka Maui. So when we started making our turn west, the boys pulled up some seaweed on their fishing lines, and on their seaweed was this little baby crab. So I was like, oh, cool, bit of life, bit of something, but that's not the seaweed I wanted to see.
Yeah.
About 10 minutes later, we pulled up another seaweed, and about 10 minutes later, this plastic grate just started floating past us in the water. So I was like, oh, rubbish, oh, cool. There's a bit of rubbish there. And that gave me confidence. We were getting closer and closer to home. And then we seen a bull kelp, and I was like, oh, there it is. There it is right there. Cool. All right, I've got 2 tohus, rubbish and bull kelp. Cool. A few more. Then the next morning, there was a bamboo floating past. I was like, yes, driftwood. Yeah, it's all happening. And then we seen dolphins. And the only time you ever see dolphins is when it's closer to island. You always see more life around islands.
Right.
Closer to the islands. Especially with the fish. They're only in really shallow water, not so much deep water.
Yeah, right.
So that sort of tohu. So we seen dolphins. And then as we get closer and closer, we seen more seaweed. And I was like, cool. All right. Hopefully tomorrow we're going to see some stagnant clouds and stuff like that. That night, I remember seeing the wind. It shifted. It went more north. I was able to pick this up with the direction of the sun, where the sun was positioned. He was more behind us at that time. So I was able to redirect our course and head directly to my destination, which was Aotea. I was meant to find Aotea was my destination. Pretty hard when you got such a massive ika, the whole North Island, and you're trying to find this one pinpoint spot. And you're trying to be as accurate as possible,
because one little bit,
that's it, bro.
There's a big difference, in terms of like where you're gonna end up. One little like thing off at that point over like heaps of space. Yeah.
So I was just trying my best, trusting in all the tohu they were given to me, and then I was able to pick up on the wind shift, and I told Toiora, if the sun sets on the right, then we're on course. And then the sun set on the right. So I was like, sweet, bro, we're on course. And then I told him, because the stars started coming out, oh, man, if that's Te Matua Maui sitting over there, then we're on course. we're bang on course, exactly where it is. And then if that's right there, then the lineup of Te Waka Maui should appear. And I remember going, telling him, oh, I'm going to go down for a bit of a rest now, bro. tell me if more stars come out, so
Mm.
I can figure out where we actually are, and make sure that we are still on course. And I went down, and about 10 minutes later, he woke me up. Bro, I think you need to come and see this. Got out and literally was Te Mata Maui, exactly where I said it would be. And when I seen that, I seen the rest of the Waka, and I know that this Waka goes from the Western Hemisphere right around to the Eastern Hemisphere. In the winter time, we call it Te Waka Tamarereti,
Yeah.
but in the summertime, we call it Te Waka Maui, and it sits on the southern horizon at a sunset at this time of the year.
Mm.
And it would be in the best place to see it is Tauranga, 37 degrees south of the equator, where you will be able to see the Milky Way sitting on the horizon as well.
Yeah.
Where I was aiming for was Aotearoa, 36 degrees north. I couldn't see the Milky Way, and that to me was enough to tell me I'm in the right latitude. Aim right there, go right there. And I think it was about 12 to 14 hours later, we've seen the island. We've seen Aotearoa. Bro, blew my mind. And Kiharoi, our captain, said, we're going to end exactly where we started when we left on Toyota's League. Get back to that exact same point,
spot.
bro. It was just like,
But
how the hell did that happen? I knew where we were.
Yeah.
Like, I always knew it, and I knew what I was looking for, and I knew that that was the lineup that I needed to find in order for me to get back to that same spot.
Yeah.
I just didn't realize how
in sync it was gonna be, eh? Like just how it just
blew
kept
my mind. It was the other thing is that in Te Mata Maui is a star called Shola, and when Papa Hector passed away, Nainoa Thompson, master navigator from Hawaii, he renamed that star Heke Nukumai. So when that appeared as well, it was like Heke Nukumai was calling his Waka home, and his Waka's named after his wife, Ngāhirakamaitawhiti Hilda Busby. So it was like he was calling his wife home. Those little tohu to me were just like, that's enough.
Yeah.
That's enough to tell me that we're on the right path. I'm still blown away today.
What
I'm
an
still
experience.
trying to process it now.
Yeah.
How did that all happen like that?
Do you guys celebrate each time like as a crew, bro, or is like a shop, bro, or is there a lot of that, like
a lot of that,
a lot of uffy and all of that kind of, because it must be a buzz, bro. You know, you're learning, putting things that you have learned into practice, but it's like you get to the end destination and it's like, fuck, we cracked it, you know, like a shot. Because how long's a voyage, like, you know, for context as well, like how long would it take? You know, from here to Samoa or like there back, like how long was your guys' time out on the Moana?
So we roughly estimated between 2 and 3 weeks.
There and back?
Yeah,
one way there?
Yeah,
right.
I think the first leg was 560 nautical miles, which if you can average 5 knots in 24 hours, you can do 120 nautical miles in a day in 24 hours. So if you think about that, that's 560 is about 5 days, 5 days. It took us 7. Like that.
Yeah.
The next one was 760. It took us 12. And then the last leg was about 300. It only took us 2 days. So it was. We can always estimate what we think we're going to do, but you always add about a week and a bit on.
Bit extra.
Yeah, bit extra, because you can't predict the weather and what the weather's going to be, and if it's going to be like that the whole time. We're just talking about straight lines. If we can straight line it, we can do it in this amount of days. But we all know that our Waka doesn't travel in a straight line. Our Waka's sails, you got a main sail, you got a mizzen. If you've got the wind coming from one direction, it's going to pull the wind down. The back one's going to pull it up. So you're actually fishtailing through the ocean.
Fuck,
you're
that's
not actually going
me.
straight, you're actually fishtailing through the ocean.
Yeah.
So then that's the ups and downs of a man as well. No man walks on a straight path. Hey, everybody goes sideways, up and downs, like that, like how we are in Te Ao. Just like the Waka. So Waka does that same journey. Takes its time, goes through ups and downs, and then eventually
arrives.
Gets closer and closer to the island.
Wow, this is like making me feel so good, bro. Just listening to you quoting about this, bro. I'm just like, man, it's, you know, obviously it's something that I haven't experienced, but it's super interesting just to hear just everything that comes from it. And it's like like the reason why I feel good, bro, is one, the experience of a lifetime that you've had, but also just how good you are at explaining, because it gives me such a good insight, and I'm sure everyone else who is listening in, like we're talking about those kinds of things that the waka does, and, you've been on your own huarahi, and like, do you use your experience as a navigator? Are you seeing parallels in there? Because you said, just there's the waka goes like this, your life goes like this, and so can you use Mātauranga that you've learnt in this space, bro, to tautaku you in this thing called life? Because obviously now you've just travelled the largest body of water. Now you've just come back home, bro. You've got technology all around you. You've got responsibilities, pāpā mode, whānau, and everything else that comes with it. And so how have you been able to climatize, bro, back into normality, I should say? But yeah, what are some of those parallel learnings, bro, that you've been able to use here that helps you in everyday life as Tamahau?
Oh, that's a big question. Off the bat, it's been pretty hard to adjust. Adjust back to home life.
Yeah.
My sleeping pattern's still out the gate. But in terms of those life lessons and how the waka moves, and how I've been able to utilize them in my everyday life, 100% use them all the time. Like I was saying earlier, navigation isn't just about knowing the stars and the waka and stuff like that. It's also about knowing yourself. Out there, I realized I was navigating myself, understanding my emotions more than actually trying to get the waka to its right destination. And then just knowing that when I come home from this, that I need to either stay with that or try and find another path, deviate from my course to get to the destination. But yeah,
being on the journey of it,
being on the journey of it. I think all of us actually use all those experiences on land, and even in our everyday life as well. And all the kaupapa I'm involved in, like mau rākau, waka, I use them 100%. Whare tapawhā is a big thing for me. And understanding your whare tapawhā, like you got to have your time with your whānau. And if you don't get that time with your whānau, you got to make time for your whānau. And that was one of the biggest things I told myself when I was coming home, was I'm just going to dedicate my time to my whānau, because they are my biggest supporters, and they're the ones that are always left at home when I go and do my thing. So it's only right that I got to give back to my whānau. And by giving back to my whānau, I'll nurture my taha wairua, my taha hinengaro, and my taha tinana at the same time, and fully fulfilling my whare tapawhā. And as long as I know that I'm strong with my whare tapawhā, that I can finally go and help others, because I know that if I don't have a strong foundation and I don't solidify my whare tapawhā, then who am I to go and help others fix their whare tapawhā, if that makes sense, if I haven't fixed my own.
Yeah.
So I always use those life lessons from the waka, but I always remember that my whānau is the foundation of everything I do.
And I think that's the best way to look at it, I suppose, too, bro, because it can be quite the distraction's not the right word, but I think that would explain, sometimes when things are going good, we just want to pour more energy into the things that are going good, and that often means sacrificing in other areas, whether it's our own whare tapawhā, whether it's whānau. There's always some kind of cost in some area. And so what I'm hearing from you is, you knew you were away for a period of time, huge experiences, awesome, and the whole waka Hourua space, and for your own professional and personal kind of development as well. But then now it's just about rebalancing, bro? Being able to rebalance and give to those things that you've been without for their time, and the people who love you have been without you as well. And so, I just want to mihi to that, because that's quite difficult, at times for everyone, particularly us as tāne, and the pressures that come with being a pāpā, being a provider, and all of those other different things. And so, I just want to mihi to that, bro. And I think that's something that I try to do myself, but also understanding the challenges within that.
Yep.
We can say, we've got to give to our whānau, but when we're giving to whānau, there's still these other temptations around, oh man, I want to be going out and doing that, or, start getting a little bit jittery, or I got to get back into something. And it's just trying to be aware of that and just be a bit more patient, and knowing that you're doing the right thing in that season. And so, one of the kaupapa that I've spoken to you about, bro, is is more around that, men's mental health, brother to brother, and I'm sure you've been in your own seasons, but I'm sure you're also connected to people and bros who have had tough times or whatever that might look like. And so, for you personally, bro, like what are you seeing at the moment in that space for us as Tāne? And also, like, what are some ways of thinking that, have either supported you or things that you feel could be helpful?
Can you ask that question again?
So it's like around men's mental health, and, it's more around, well, I'll go there, like it's a tough time for a lot of Tāne, and even more so at this time of the year. So the first part was like, what are you seeing in that space? What are your observations? And it's not even a kōrero to be like direct or like you have all the advice. It's just, what are your whakaro, around where we're at as Tāne? And also you might even want to use your own challenges with navigating through that space if you want to, or just, anything along those lines, bro.
I'll talk more about the committing too much to one space.
Yeah.
Prior to our haringa, I found myself doing the maintenance by myself a lot. Our maintenance took us about 3.5 months. It was myself and my father-in-law, Jack, that was down there most of the time, but a lot of times I was there by myself alone, doing the maintenance. I remember having a mental breakdown to the crew about this because it just didn't help at all. I was dedicating so much time to the waka, not enough time to my studies, and also not enough time to my whānau. So they missed out. Even before I left, I felt real mamai inside. Mamai inside that I didn't get their whānau time. Mamai inside that I spent too much time at the waka. Mamai inside that I didn't get to actually prep myself properly for my journey. So I had all of this confusion going on. And I remember breaking down to the crew. We were on our way up and I just snapped. I just had to let them know, let them know how I felt and why I was feeling like that. Even to explain why I don't ask for help. Because it's something big that us Tāne Māori don't like to do, is ask for help. Because we all think that we can do everything by ourselves. I don't know where that mentality comes from, but it's just something that's...
And it's generic, bro. It's, karika koe anaki, like as you say, that's a Tāne thing in general. Too proud, eh, bro? I got this.
But I remember going out there and I told the crew how I felt. It's probably not the best place to do it out there on the Moana, but then at the same time, it was the only place that I felt safe. And so had to explain this to the crew. I felt all this mamai from doing all this maintenance. Felt the mamai because I didn't get to spend time with my whānau. Hence the reason why when I came home, I told myself my whānau is in priority. They missed out on all their time with me, and I know that if I get back to my whānau, hopefully my whare tapawhā will mend itself again. Mentally, spiritually, physical part will come later on, but the mental and the spiritual, that's to me is important. Even out on the water, you'll find yourself going into dark spaces. If it's not the tohu, you're not seeing the tohu that you want to see. You're not seeing the numbers. Like if you're doing dead reckoning and you're calculating exactly where you think you are, and it's not all adding up and stuff like that, you start going into dark spaces.
Is that because of the doubt starts to creep in and all of that kind of like the anxiety or whatever? Yeah.
Even to a point where some crew might question you. Stuff like that throws doubt straight away. And it's not a nice space. But it's also the challenge that comes with that makes you a stronger person. And perseverance through those dark times will grow a strong person. And then that's what I found like I had to do, was persevere through the dark spaces in order for myself to find the light. And only by finding the light that I can actually understand what I need to do. I don't know if that's the answer for everyone. Because everybody's going to have their own type of dark space whether good or bad. But it's up to them how they navigate through that space. So quite fortunate that I was able to navigate through stars to find my island. But navigating my own emotions was probably the biggest challenge for me in order to find my island. If that makes sense. If that makes sense in a way.
Makes sense, bro.
Yeah, because that self-doubt was a big one. And it's probably why I still don't understand or realise what just happened. Found the island the way we found it.
Yeah.
Because I've still got this barrier of
it shouldn't have happened that way, or should
you
have been
know,
that easy. Yeah.
stuff like that. Like, hey, how did that happen?
Yeah.
Nah, I need to go back to my books. Oh, now I start spiraling down, overthinking has been like that, because I'm a bit of an overthinker like that. When we did find the island and it was Aotearoa, it just again blew my mind. Like, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Oh, it does. Like, the thing that I want to meet to, bro, is just there one. Oh, there's a few things actually, but it was what I just dropped in on is just how we are proud as tāne, and we do just end up trying to isolate ourselves to get the mahi done. And even though we don't fully have capacity, to do that, we'll bloody find the capacity to do it, and if that means sacrificing your own well-being, like just to get the mahi done, that tends to be a theme, for a lot of us as tāne. And the other thing that I heard you say was you felt safe, even though you're out in Moana and you probably would have rather have done it prior to that, but you felt safe to be able to express, and that's a huge thing that I want to mihi to as well. But even just the parallels there again, bro, you navigated the stars to find Aotearoa, but you were able to use a lot of self-reflection and self-awareness to navigate your own emotions so that you could, I guess, show up in the way that you need to. But more importantly, the light that you arrived to was clarity around what, the next step is going to look like. Because there's sometimes a big thing is that we've got to realize that we've got time, and that we have moments where we can adjust and we can pick up the slack in other areas. And the thing that probably hurts us mostly is what you're talking about, is when we have that self-doubt, because we are our own worst critic. We beat ourselves up more than anyone else, and that's the thing that we have to not battle through, but we have to sit with it, give it its mauri, give it its mana, have your moment, but come on, let's get back into a different space. And something that I'll share is, I had a mean heart-to-heart with my wahine just over the weekend, and there's been times where I would share things with her, and I would share it in a way because for her to know what's actually going on, whether it's with me or things that I'm doing. But in me sharing that, what I've noticed from my wahine is that she goes into survival mode too. So she'll go into action and just trying to help out. Whereas over the weekend, I had the courage where I felt safe to actually share with her about what I actually needed, not what she thought would help. And that was, I actually don't need you to do anything, but just give me a bit more comfort and just be more present. And that's all I need outside of what you think you're doing. Because it is helpful, but for me as a husband, me as her tāne, this is what I need from you when I'm being vulnerable, is not necessarily to go out and try and action it. It's nah, just be present with me in that time and just give me a bit of awhi. And so that was a vulnerable moment for me, but just to know that when you do eventually communicate, bro, when you're out on the moana and it actually came out, you feel so much better, and it can be received quite well. And when it is received well, far out, you just have a bit more lightness to be able to carry on doing the do, and so was it received well, bro? When you spoke out with the whānau, they're yeah. Or was it just more of a personal thing for you to let it out?
Oh, a bit of both.
Yeah.
Bit of both. Believe it was received well. I remember just feeling light, just feeling way better after it. Personally, even one of the bros asked me, what does it feel like going from just being by yourself in the shed working day to day to be surrounded by all the people again? What's that like? I was like, and I told him straight up, I left that at that last time, bro, and I need to leave it there because the more I give it something, it's gonna just
Yeah, build up again, eh?
Build up again.
Yeah, cool.
And that was pretty much my answer to him. I left that all there, bro. But I will answer the question directly and be like, it is different. It is different, but it's good at the same time. Because if I found myself still being lonely, even surrounded by people, then I obviously didn't get everything off my chest.
Yeah.
And I'm still carrying something. And I knew that if I kept on carrying it, it's just going to build up again. Waste of time doing that.
Yeah.
There's some things you can help and there's some things you just can't. And you just got to be able to realize which ones you can help and nurture and go forward with that. And the ones you can't really help, you're just going to
let it go, eh?
Let it go. Yeah. Put them in another pot.
Well, as you said, bro, like we're just a little speck, eh? Right, when we build things up in our mind, that's a mean thing to come back to, eh? Just to be like, okay, because we tend to make things bigger than what they actually are. Because, like, say we have a thought, or say we're going through something, and then we start to get triggered, eh? And we get like emotionally involved in like whatever's going on, and there could be stress, hardship, and so that feeds, eh? Our emotions feed our thinking. And then all of a sudden, bro, you're just down this bloody corridor and there's all of these stories that you're telling yourself that aren't even real. So you're just in that cycle. And that's when we turn one thing into something huge. And that's why I just really resonated with that kōrero around humility and just knowing that, man, we're a part of something so much bigger. And if we can remind ourselves of that as often as we can, what it tends to happen is we just settle a little bit more way and we're not in those heightened states. And so what are some new things that are coming up, bro? There's Te Whare Tū Taua, there's the national wānanga happening right now in this moment. Obviously, you're giving to your whānau, but Mauraka's been a big part of your journey too, bro. So, what's the kōrero around Mauraka, and what keeps you sort of turning up into that space as well, brother?
So me, Mauraka, and growing up here, I guess the reason why I keep going is because of my mentors and the next generation. My mentors such as Awanu Black, Maya Wharekura, Jack Thatcher, Koro Nicholas, people like them, taught me the passion. And then I had tuakanas like Kiharo Nuku, Rikiro Lutenberger, Pohe Lutenberger, that would go out and do these mean as well. Mean as well. And you're just like sitting there as a kid like, that's Maui. Maui right there, There's two Mātauranga. Seeing all these people just being awesome Māori, awesome role models. And then I eventually was given the task to teach our young ones. And when I stepped into that position, I realized that the only way I'm going to be able to teach them is if I grow and get better and better. So Pauwaru came home. His name's Lyndon Morris. Learnt a lot of his Mauraka up in Auckland, West Auckland, under Papa Hemi Titan. And he was able to come home and start our pika here in Tauranga called Tūtaua Tauranga. I've been a part of that pika for the last 8 years. I think it's 8 years. And a group of them went down to Takapau this weekend for the national hui ato. About 400 kaihoe down there. And one of my tuakana, Shannon Burrell, who went for his pauwaru as well last week. So very cool moment for us in Tauranga. Obviously, I chose my whānau only because I've only just come home. My goal was to grow to Pauwhetu, but unfortunately, that will be set for another
next time.
Can't do everything. Already talked about can't do everything. But yeah, for Mauraka, the one thing that keeps drawing me back is the next generation. In order for our next generation to be better than our predecessors, we need to be better. And our heights will be their foundations. If we can grow our Mauraka capacity here in Tauranga and build a strong foundation for them to grow even higher, and every generation after them, they're going to grow higher and higher. That's one reason why I keep going back is for them. I have a lot of nephews. I wasn't the goodest is not even a word. I wasn't a good kid when I was young. I was a bit of a naughty kid. And Mauraka just kept me on that good line. So wanted to give that an opportunity to all my nephews and all my little cousins to see that pathway. and to utilize this pathway to keep them on the straight, which I've seen a lot of my nephews already come through rākau and already going up the levels, and hopefully it just resonates with the rest of Tangata Moana. We have 115 kids in our program, Ngāhi no Koki Parapara, and I just started our girls module 2 years ago, which has about 100 and something girls in it. So that's where I see it going, is our younger ones, is our kids. And if we can, I want to say it captures the word, but if we can get them hooked on rākau at such a young age, then it'll just keep growing and growing. And by the time they're in their early 20s or even late 20s, they are going to be the top guns in Tauranga. Well, that's how I see it anyway.
You can already see that the reanga who are reaching Pauwari, they're actually quite young. Hey, like it's cool to see a lot young faces, and like there's their kōrero ngā ranga tira moa pōpō, but there's like straight rangatiri o inainei happening at the moment, bro, and that's like quite cool. And what I'm hearing also is the ambition to do things for that next generation. But in order to do so, there has to be a level of commitment to self, because if you're better, then obviously the things that you're connected to get the best of that. And then you can support others, whether it's sharing Mātauranga or being able to gift whatever comes from being in that space, Waka Hourua, Waka taua, rākau, even just your own tamariki, bro. And so, do you, to finish us off, like, is that something that you think about more, which is, do you think about the future for tamariki, or do you think about what I need to do in order for that? So it's are you at the center for the other things, or is the other things at the center for you to do the things?
That's a good question. I think more of the first one, I think I'm only here in this position to gather that Mātauranga for the next generation. It's not really for me to hold on to. It's actually, I feel like I'm in that position where my job is to go out and gather all this stuff and then set a better pathway for the next generation. Like one of my kaihoe said, knowledge that's not shared is dead knowledge. And if you don't share it, then why did you learn it in the first place? All this knowledge is freely given, passed to anyone. It's not yours to hold on to. So I look at it in that sense. I'm only one cog of the machine. I'm only one gear of the machine, and I just got to do my job in order for the rest of the parts to do their jobs. So yeah, I think I'm one of those ones. I'm just in my position to learn this Mātauranga and set up the platforms for the next generation.
For the others.
Have a kai at the table.
That's the best part of, I suppose, learning though too, is then getting the privilege to be able to share that. And you, from my experience anyway, you actually learn so much in teaching, because it shows you just how much you know, and also like where you've applied that Mātauranga for it to actually be something that you fully understand. And so, for you to have all of these different pathways and, doing really well in all of these spaces, but just that humility and where it's coming from, and being able to, gift that to others in these spaces is really awesome, bro. So I just want to pass it over to you, bro. We've had an amazing kōrero. You've opened up my eyes. You've given us all an experience in terms of the way you speak, bro. The visuals just come quite clearly. Particularly talking about being in the awa and being in the moana and the things that you have just gone through recently. So just want to pass it over to you, bro. If there's any kōrero at the top of your mind or on your heart that you feel you could, just share some last words with our whānau.
True. Just some personal stuff. If you're interested in waka taua, find a love for the ocean. Find the love for the ocean, because it's one thing to swim in the ocean, but it's another to get on the ocean, on top of the ocean, and then Tangaroa starts showing all of its many faces to you, and you start freaking out. Waka Hourua, same thing. Find the love for the ocean. Understand tāwhiri. Understand tāwhiri in its many faces. Even if you find yourself sitting inside of a storm, and you find the calmness and the beauty inside of a storm, then you're one of those people that are ready for the waka haurua. If navigation's your thing, you obviously need to know how to sail. So waka haurua, building up through Tangaroa is a good one. And one of my other passions are mauraka. If you're interested in mauraka, I would say give it a go. It's good for the tinana, good for the wairua and the hinengaro, good for mobility and getting yourself out there into kaupapa Māori. But yeah, that's just some kōrero from me to finish it off. Mihi ana kia koutou, kua are taringa mai ki tēnei o ngā kōrero, mihi ana hoki kia koe brother, nāui tuku mai te karanga ki tēnei, kia umai ki roto i tō whare o planting seeds, mihi ana kia koutou, tēnā tātou.
Che, tēnā koe Tamahau, mihi nui ana kia koe, bro. One last whakaaro as you were talking about these pathways of oranga, pathways of sharpening skills and sharpening, ourselves. One of the black belts where I go to do jiu-jitsu, one of the things that he shared with someone that I really resonated with, he said, he's a black belt, but he said, I'm just a white belt, but I've just kept turning up. And that's how you get skillful at things, is the commitment and the discipline to something. And it's just the amount of time that you give to certain things is going to reflect your skill set. And so just wanted to share that kia tāpiri ake ki o kōrero is just when we get through those barriers and we just turn up and we get consistent enough, there's always going to be people that are going to be ahead of you, but just as Tamahau was saying, it's their responsibility as well to support you on your journey. So let's be open to those learnings, but let's also just back ourselves enough to be able to go into these new spaces. So ai runga i tērā, bro, mihi nui ana kia koe. The first navigator to come on the Planting Seeds podcast. Congratulations on that tohu, but not tohu, of 10 years and the haringa that you've been on, bro. And I just want to also give you a lot of energy for this time of just giving back to your whānau pila, and just being present and just not only giving love, but receiving love from all of those around you. So ai mihi nui ana kia koe, and to the whānau, we'll see you in the next one. Che. Che ma, bro. Mickey, first podcast down, bro.